Hi, my name is Ty Cappy, and today I'm talking about the French and Indian War and how it changed America. So, with a name like the French and Indian War, you would think that it was against the French and the Indians. Well, this is not correct. It was actually against the French and the British. Now, the Native Americans would take a part in this war, but they would take part on both sides, mainly with the French, but the British also had help. Now, war was officially declared in 1756. It was declared by the British. What started this war? This war was started by the French because the British weren't happy that the French were intruding on British territory in the Ohio River Valley. The French were continuously going on British territory, partially because the territories weren't set back in the day and they might have been confusing. Now the French were interested in the Ohio River Valley because of the fur trade. The fur trade was a major part of the France's income. So in the very beginning of the war, George Washington was in charge of the Virginia militia. Now, this would be the same George Washington who leads the colonists in the Revolutionary War. But at the time, George Washington was very young and inexperienced. This lack of experience would cause George Washington to be not very successful. He was not successful at all at driving the French out of the Ohio River Valley. So, faced with the problem of leadership, the British looked at Edward Braddock. Edward Braddock was a very successful and very high-ranked military leader. But just like George Washington, he would fail in driving the French out of the Ohio River Valley. So the British were still looking for a leader, and neither Edward Braddock or George Washington were the right people for the job. So, as a last resort, they looked at William Pitt. Now, William Pitt changed the whole plan. He replaced a lot of the old leaders with newer, younger leaders with new strategies and new plans. He looked at the war like nobody else did. Now, while the British were doing all this, they were paying a lot of money to have goods shipped over for the war. So with new leadership and new supplies, the British would overwhelm the French, unlike how the war started. In September 1760, the British would take Montreal. Now, this didn't officially end the war, but it would basically end the France's hope. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially ending the war and giving America the British Ohio River Valley, not America. Now, at the end of the day, the British won the French-Indian War, but it came at a very high cost. The high cost was the amount of money it took to get goods, leaders, troops over to America. This was very expensive and would cause a major war debt for the British. The British had no options, thought they had no options but other to tax the colonists. They taxed the colonists very highly on goods such as tea and other things. Now, the taxation without representation greatly angered the colonists. This anger towards the British would cause the colonists to declare war on the British. Now, ironically enough, the British trained our greatest military leader, George Washington. It was the experience in the French and Indian War that gave Washington the proper learning how to become a proper general and effective military leader. The French would not forget the war. So during the Revolutionary War, the colonists reached out to France asking for naval support. And with France still being mad about the French and Indian War, they accepted the offer. And the French would help America with naval support. So, at the end of the day, the British did beat the French in the French and Indian War, but it came at such a high cost. And because of this, I truly think that America was the winner of the French and Indian War. Thank you for listening to my speech about the French and Indian War.